Geek Out! Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
Jake.
And this week we have an interview. You'll notice this episode's out on a Monday because it's the final order cutoff for Paradiso by Ram V and Dev. We had them call all the way in from London and Bangalore to get this interview in. It's a new image comic series about kind of a sentient city in a post-apocalyptic world. First issue hits Wednesday, December 6th. But again, the final order cutoff day is today. So, let's let them talk about it without much further ado. And joining us this week, we have Ram V and Dev, the co-creators behind Paradiso, the new image comic series that comes out everywhere on Wednesday, December 6th in comic book stores and on Comixology if you're more digitally inclined. The final order cutoff is Monday, November
13th.
November 13th.
Yeah, that's right.
Literally everybody else.
Horror in your eyes because I was like, oh shit.
I should have pulled up my calendar.
I was literally flipping through my phone to open up the calendar. I was like, I've already forgotten the date too.
Thank you guys.
Yes.
But yeah, thanks for coming on.
Well, I've got that date.
So it's not just
printed in memory.
Yeah. I'm glad to know it's not just me who's bad with dates and days.
Yeah.
I had the release date all written down. I was like, I'm good.
Yeah, I saw it slowly crawl over your face. I was like, oh no, get there, Sam, get there.
But so let's go ahead and start at the beginning. You guys had previously worked together on the self-published Black Mamba. Here you are doing Paradiso, another city set in an urban setting. What is it about? What differentiates Paradiso, and what kind of place did Paradiso come from inspirationally?
So actually, Paradiso came up in an early conversation that I had with an architect friend of mine. And so really the inspiration for Paradiso comes from the idea that we're building more and more intelligent urban landscapes as we advance technology. And the idea of setting a very human story inside an urban landscape that was in itself alive and trying to understand us as human beings and what it means to be alive. That was kind of the spark that we used to get the story from. Originally, we'd only intended to write short stories and vignettes set in this setting, but that idea came up almost 6 years ago, and I didn't even know Dave back then.
Yeah.
But over the years, it's just kind of exploded into this mega concept that we're dealing with now. And right after Dave and I had finished working on Black Mamba, we were talking about maybe doing something bigger and longer. And I had this.
Actually, I think it was in almost around the end of Black Mamba that we started, right? We're still at the last story, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I think we were finishing up the last story of Black Mamba.
Last story when we started talking about this book.
Yeah. And right about that time, I realized I had this giant repository of stories to work with. And I pitched the idea to Dave, and he kind of took it over from there.
Well, that's cool. I mean,
I took it over, but I was like, Ram, are you? Because when I first heard about the story, it was so big in scope. It kind of intimidated me a bit. I was like, oh my god, he's talking about a living city. What are the implications there? But Ram really helped, bringing it down, scaling it down for me. So it went well from there.
Well, Black Mamba kind of explored the magic that exists and permeates through the streets of Mumbai. Here you are with Paradiso City, kind of exploring. It's much more overtly sentient. There's that analogy is made more realized here. What is it about the urban landscape that you guys find so intriguing as storytellers?
Well, I've always grown up in big, bustling, sort of noisy cities, and always lived in them. I grew up in Mumbai. I moved to Philadelphia and then New York for a while when I was in the States, and then I live in London now. So I think part of my fascination with the urban landscape is just the fact that I've lived in them for so long, and I've also had the opportunity to live in different urban landscapes, and so the idea that these landscapes have a personality of their own and they affect the people that live within them has always been something that I've dealt with on a daily basis. So it's totally understandable why I'm obsessed with cities and what they do to the people within. But from a storytelling perspective, I also just like the idea of something so huge and ununderstandable. I mean, we can define a city by its borders, but really, no one can, if you walk to a place on a road, no one can point at this place and says, this is where this city ends. So just the fact that there is something so amalgamous and monstrous almost in its size and scale, and the fact that people live inside of it and are affected by it is a beautiful concept to explore via stories.
Yeah, because I've pretty much never lived anywhere outside India my whole life. But the city I lived in was Kolkata. Like, I grew up here. So, like, I developed this sort of, I don't know how to put it down. Like, I don't know how to make it concise. Like, I have developed this sort of feeling about cities. And I think I made it my own in Black Mamba. When I made that, I had never made anything like that before. Because honestly, I've never lived in Mumbai myself. But I've visited it a few times, and like, expressing cities not just through buildings, and like, it's not just a cityscape. Like, look at that building, it's so big. It's more about the feeling those cityscapes bring in you. It's like entering a world full of emotions that can just take over you. And that's what I try to bring to Paradiso, actually.
With the lead characters, we've got Jack, we've got Nora. You know, they're both coming to Paradiso for completely different reasons. What do you think it is about Paradiso? What do you think the city symbolizes for each of them?
Well, I think as you'll see this premise develop as the story goes along, but basically, once the midnight event happened, which is what destroyed or ended civilization as we knew it, life outside of places like Paradiso, are there other places? I don't know. But life outside of Paradiso has become untenable in that our understanding of technology went backward, and pretty much all the technology we were using went defunct. So people moving to Paradiso is kind of the cultural promised land for these people. So there's always people trying to get into the city. Now, there are obviously very different reasons why Jack and Nora are trying to get into the city. And to be fair, Nora's motivations aren't exactly clear even at this point. They will become clearer as the story goes on. Jack is pretty much clear, but again, I'm trying not to say much more in terms of the motivations because I don't want to give away spoilers. So what you see is only the surface.
To be fair, Jack's motives aren't also that clear. Like, we just know what he wants. We don't know, like, the circumstances surrounding it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he has this magic thing that he waves around, and he just like, yeah, I have to go to Paradiso, but we never see why he has to go there. And like, I think that's what is going to intrigue the readers. They're going to be like, okay, yeah, he has this object, but why does he need to go to Paradiso? That actually, like, that was one of the things that intrigued me when I first heard the concept. And I was like, okay, but why does he need to go there? And then Ram told me all of it, which, as Ram said, I can't disclose to you because spoilers.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned the object, the I believe it's called the pneuma, and
Pneuma.
Yeah.
Pardon my ancient Greek, but pneuma, if I remember correctly, means soul or spirit. Will that kind of play a larger role in the mystery behind the city itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the device is pretty much in sort of the center of the plot, and the fact that it's called the pneuma also lends deeper meaning to everything that we'll see happen. Not only in this first arc, but pretty much throughout the entire story. The story pretty much has to do with why the Numa was made in the first place, and how it was made, and for whom it was made, and what the city has to do with that, and what was Paradiso's contribution, and the fact that this thing exists, and the fact that Jack is intrinsically connected to her.
Excellent. You know, this first issue kicks off with a pretty vibrant flashback. Will we start to, moving forward, we'll see more insight into Jack's past and Honoria's past? Will we see a little bit more behind the Midnight event?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Midnight, and I've mentioned this before in other interviews. Obviously, the flashback is super intriguing, but I'm not a big fan of doing like an expositional issue that we just go back into the past and look at everything that's going on. I would much rather have snippets of information show up as we're following Jack's story through the city, and as these snippets of information start coming in, the past becomes clear even as you're following the storyline in the present, and the clarity of that past and how much you know about the past kind of ties into your experience of the current narrative. So we're starting this first issue with the reader pretty much not knowing anything about Jack's past outside of those sort of 3 or 4 pages of flashback. And with issue 2, you'll get a little bit of what the Midnight was like and what it was about. Maybe it'll give you a hint at maybe what happened. And then by the time you're reading through, maybe issue 8 or 12, you'll have a pretty firm idea, and it'll be very different from the initial idea that you're getting in these issues.
With the you were mentioning earlier, Dev, about kind of making the worlds your own, and of course, Ram, you were mentioning you had lived in multiple urban areas: Philly, New York, now London, Mumbai. And then Dev, you're from Bangalore.
Kolkata.
Kolkata.
No, Bangalore. I live in Bangalore, but I've lived most of my life in Kolkata. But yeah, I've also been to Bangalore.
Right.
I live there now.
Which is, if we're talking living, breathing cities, that's at the forefront of the tech boom in India. Yeah.
It's it's a very vibrant and like booming metropolitan area, basically.
How does that influence how you craft these environments? Even though we're kind of in this post-apocalyptic world, there is something going on there. You see that both the shadows of the old world and yet something new. And I was wondering how you kind of develop that moving forward.
Like when we started talking about this book, Ram basically came to me with this pitch, like, dude, we're gonna make this book, and it's gonna have amazingly huge buildings. And I was like, okay, count me out. Eventually I was like, no, I want to do it. So I got him, and when he said like amazingly huge buildings, it's not like I drew all the inspiration from the cities I've lived in. Like I took references from New York and a lot of other cities, UK. I took references from there, and also from Akira. But when it comes down to like our city, living in a metropolitan city like Bangalore, it actually helped me out, because Bangalore is the kind of city where there's like stretches of huge tall buildings around, and then there's also stretches of like almost nothing, and that as like places where the buildings still stand, and also places where the buildings have like completely just, and also like the places where the buildings are. The way I draw, I try to like root it in a bit of realism. Like, yeah, it is going to be a bit fantastical. Like it's gonna be like the buildings are gonna be bigger than anything you've ever seen, but also like have it be a bit realistic. So that's where my references came in. I like looked at buildings, how they are made, how the foundations are created, and from there I like try to build all the.
I mean, I also feel like there's always an existing element of something post-apocalyptic, even in modern day cities. I mean, I know for a fact that there are bits of Mumbai that will certainly look post-apocalyptic today, and possibly parts of New York that do that too. I remember traveling to Pittsburgh at one point, and there were abandoned steel mills in Pittsburgh that looked just incredibly haunting. And so when I describe scenes and when I try to put environments into the story, at least into the script when Dave sees them, I try to send over references sometimes, and they're usually bits that we see today, and then Dave takes them and he kind of extrapolates the visuals from that.
I still remember you said that, like, the first thing. I still remember, like, that was one of the first things you said. Like, I think you guys will also see this in the issue later. Like, there's just this building laying on its side, and that was his first description of, like, one of his first descriptions of Paradiso to me. So, like, you guys will see it later. Like, people who read it will see it later. But that had a huge impact on me, actually, in selling the book. That, like, there's just this monumentally huge building that's laying on its side. Like, it has fallen down. And that imagery was just so riveting that I was like, yeah, I gotta draw that.
I think with both characters, what we're seeing is, if anything, I feel like for people coming to the city for the first time, there's always the promise of new starts or unrealized ambition that comes with those cities, just the idea of redemption and beginning again. Are those themes that are going to play very heavily for the characters moving forward?
I think so, to an extent, yeah. With Jack especially, coming to this new city is him looking for answers, is him looking for new beginnings. And so I think you'll see that reflect through the story. But more importantly, I think for Paradiso herself, given the scale of cities and given the scale of time, having these people living within her and understanding what it means to be alive, that itself is a new beginning. So it's interesting how the characters search for a new life, or better life, if you will, and Paradiso's search for understanding life kind of play into each other.
There, when I was looking at some of the art, Dev, there is definitely, I mean, some people don't like talking influences, but I would be remiss. It really does remind me of Sean Murphy or Nick Dragata. What were some of your more specific influences when it came to visualizing Paradiso?
When it came to visualizing Paradiso, I would have to say one of my biggest influences was Otomo, Katsuhiro Otomo from Akira, and because that really made me, like, kind of wowed me when I read Otomo's Akira, and like days after that, like, because that was at the time, like, when I got into Akira, I started really looking into it, because at around that time I was also working on Paradiso. So for the buildings and everything, I started taking a lot of references from that. As for everything else, like art-wise, yeah, you're right about that. Sean Murphy is a huge influence on me, and I love the way he draws buildings at night. So I took a lot of influences from him as well. And also James Harren is one of my favorite artists, actually. The way he does buildings is very reminiscent of the way manga artists do buildings in, like, broken cities sometimes. So that was also a big influence for me.
Yeah, I do remember sending over references from Sean Murphy's Punk Rock Jesus buildings over to Dave and going, oh, but can we do something like this, but broken down and destroyed?
Well, one of my questions, like, you talk about drawing landscapes, and you've kind of talked about a little bit about it already. But, like, I always love the story of Frank Miller would sit on his, like, porch or his fire escape or his deck or whatever, and just
whatever he's got in Hell's
Kitchen. Whatever he's got, and he would just draw kind of the skyline. And I think that's something that I see it a lot in comic books now. I mean, obviously it's a big thing in comics now, but I think like the cities, like landscape and like with this book in particular, talking Sean Murphy and other artists, like the importance of making a city be just as much of a character, I think has become so important. And I think that's something that sometimes gets lost on comics. Like they're just like, oh, and here's a building in the background here. But there's this, I mean, I won't go into like specifics.
But if there's ever a book that has the city as a character,
well, yeah, but I mean, like there's a splash page in this in particular that I mean will knock your socks off in terms of like buildings. Is that something where you would? I mean, you kind of talked about it, I guess, a little, but you would just kind of sit outside and just draw what you saw in terms of buildings and cityscapes and incorporate that.
And we talked about it a lot, actually. The problem with that is like there's really like the scale of Paradiso that we had decided on. Mm-hmm. The scale of it, like there's very few cities, even in the times we're living at, that would rival Paradiso.
That's true.
So it's really hard to bring in that. But so that's why what I did was take references, mm-hmm. but also, like I said, like when you live in a city, like drawing a city, just drawing buildings is very different from giving the feel of a city that's been lived in. Like you really need to understand the cities, and I think that's what me and Ram really worked together well on in Black Mumba, and the feeling of like there's different parts in the story where they're outside Paradiso, and then they reach in. So like I've tried my best to like make it feel like when they're outside Paradiso, you feel like it's a different atmosphere. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you get in there, it's a completely different environment. Like the buildings are more close together. You see the horizon is like more littered with buildings around you. And when you walk through the city, when you're going through the city, like I think there are a few sequences in the first issue themselves. And that's where I try to bring the buildings to life, basically. But I also do that. I like sit outside and draw the buildings because, structures are really important to make buildings believable. And that's pretty important, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think you knocked that out of the park because, like I said, I think some people might take for granted, like, sit and draw and create this kind of city that we've never seen before. And I always like hearing about like how artists will kind of incorporate all these different pieces from their own life to create something that no one's ever seen before. That's always really cool to see come out on a page.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I also want to point out is, so the series was originally conceptualized with a friend of mine, Rajiv. And when we designed, like page 3, I think, or page 4 is page 4 is Aquarius Point, and it's this channel that like massive transportation vehicles used to go through this channel. And designing that, I remember we had a particularly hard time on because we wanted to make it feel architecturally relevant and acceptable. And so we had to go back and actually, hypothesize how future architects might design a transport channel like this.
Yeah, not even talking architecturally, it was just hard to conceptualize that, like the inside, it's like where the people have made the buildings is actually the inside of a massive like transportation track. It was so hard for me to visualize, but Ram was like, no, this is how I imagine it. And then I was like, oh, that, okay. So then I made it and I was like, yeah, this. And you're like, more like that. And I was like, cool.
That's always good when it works out,
Yeah.
It kind of, in some ways, it reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have seen the new Blade Runner yet, but those environments.
I haven't yet, actually.
Well, I won't spoil anything then. We'll just kind of move right along. But those...
I like how Dave jumps in like, no, don't spoil it for me. I haven't seen it yet.
Warning. You don't need to give the warning. I need to give the warning that I haven't seen it.
Oh man. Fair enough. I'll just say environments reflect characters. That's it.
That's
really... to be fair, I've seen Blade Runner, but Paradiso was actually created before this version of the movie came out. So interestingly, I think the concepts exist. I think they've existed in manga for a really long time, of cities and places like this, and so So characterization of cityscapes might be a sort of new thing to push this far, but at least the visual language of that has existed before, especially in manga.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with the kind of the post-apocalyptic landscapes that you guys got, going on.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you conceived this in the final stages of Black Mamba. Just tonally, what made you want to shift from noir to post-apocalyptic sci-fi?
Paradiso had existed before Black Mamba, and I've always, I guess from a writer's perspective, I was only starting out making comics when I did Black Mamba. And so I feel like I'm still in that part of my writing process where I'm figuring out what I want to do, what I'm good at, if I want to stick to one thing or if I just want to jump around and do whatever I want to. And because Paradiso had existed for so long, it had become an almost fully realized thing inside my head. And when we were finishing Black Mamba, Dave and I were talking, and we'd really enjoyed working with each other on that book. And we'd kind of gone through, difficult times with that book, getting pages done, deadlines. But I think we knew each other better as collaborators and artists at that point. And it was reasonable then that we were talking about doing something that was longer. Black Mamba was getting me a little bit more recognition with publishers and editors. I'd shown the book around, or at least sent the pages around, and everything was very encouraging about that book. And so when I came to Dave, I said, do you want to do this? So it wasn't as much of a tonal shift from noir into science fiction, as much as this project had just been sort of growing and mutating in the background while we did Black Mamba, which was a shorter thing, at least for me.
Like when I haven't done many science fiction projects actually, when I look back, but I have a lot of chances to do them, but I never just panned out. So I've always loved science fiction and sort of bits of horror and fantasy as well. So when Ram finally came to me with this book, it was the natural progression because I had wanted to do a science fiction book forever. And Ram came to me with this idea, and I was like, okay, it's buildings and cars and stuff. And I've got to say, when I started out with Paradiso, I wasn't really good at buildings and cars, basically. So I took quite a bit of time.
So he says.
Well, I'm gonna be critical of myself. I'm an artist after all. But I finished Black Mamba, and then I took a while to get into the book. And I also basically tried out. I did what you were talking about earlier, sitting outside, drawing buildings, looking through references, drawing cars, and trying to how do you say that? Trying to extrapolate it to put it in a world where cars are basically ruined. You build things from scavenged parts. It's I worked on that a lot till it started taking shape, and I started getting a bit more confident. And that's when the pages started coming along. And after a while, I was drawing, and I was like, okay, this looks more like what I had in mind. And now I'm finishing the fourth issue of the first arc. And now I feel like I'm at a point where I can draw it the way I see it in my head. So in that way, Paradiso was basically the next step of the evolution for me as an artist, I feel like.
That's awesome. I love hearing when artists will kind of challenge themselves like that. Not to bring up Frank Miller again, but I'll bring up Frank Miller again. A story I always like.
He's our patron saint.
Yeah,
really.
Everything goes back to Frank Miller. But I like the idea where like you were saying with he couldn't draw car. I think he said something he had a problem drawing cars and women. So he was like, I'm gonna do Sin City and have every page be women and cars and make and he was he would go out and buy like toy cars and just study the hell out of them.
Well, Jim Lee would do something different, right? When he drew the first issue of Hush, he drew every tread of Batman's boot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he's like, oh, I have to do that for every issue.
And
now.
same with like Todd McFarlane, where he's like, the Todd McFarlane web. Like before, they would just draw a line, and then he's like, oh shit, I've reinvented the web, but it's the most detailed fucking thing of all time. So now I have to draw the most detailed web of all time. But that's funny.
His web keeps getting more and more detailed.
Yeah,
as time goes by.
Exactly.
Every strand.
Yeah.
So to kind of tease moving forward, what can we expect? Both thematically and narratively with this first arc.
With the first arc, I think. Well, I want to first talk about something we're doing with all the arcs, and that will put the first arc in perspective. What we wanted to do was, or what we're trying to say is that the city knows us through the remnants of history that we left behind before the civilization ended. And so the city only knows us through all the sort of media and information that we generated over that period of time. So in some way, each arc is an homage to something in pop culture, in media that we see today, and we're using that as a lens to tell the story inside the city in each arc. So the first arc you'll see has a very sort of Mad Max vibe about it. It's this dry, dusty place. There are lots of vehicles, lots of gangs riding around. But as the story moves on, the moment we go into the second arc, you'll see that theme change, that visual theme at least change. So that's one thing I think people can expect with each of the arcs is something new with each arc in the way we look at the city and the way we deal with the story. As far as the narrative is concerned, I would say it has the depth of something like Westworld, where, we're telling a science fiction story, but in the end, we're asking very fundamental and human questions. What does it mean to be alive? Especially in context of a city that has no sense of mortality, because the whole idea of cities that people live and die, but cities go on for hundreds of years, and if we say that the people define a city, then if people necessarily die and are replaced in generations, then the city necessarily has a personality of her own. And so it must be true that the city affects the people who live within her as well. So largely speaking, it's that concept that we're going to try and explode through these arcs. Obviously, there are space vampires, there are robot wars, there are entire arcs set inside a location in the city that's been leaking a hallucinogen for hundreds of years. So there's a full-on dream arc. But the fundamental theme and the fundamental question is, what does it mean to be alive?
So basically what Ram said right now, those three things, like robot wars and space vampires and the hallucinogens, those are the things he's like keeping me on the line for. Like when he described future arcs to me, he was like, these are the things you get to draw. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care about any other stuff. I just want to draw those things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So those are the things he's like, yeah, come, I'm going to reel you in now.
This sounds very much like a script discussion. Dave, do you see? This is what it means to be alive. You go, all right, when are these guys kicking the shit out of each other?
When is the robot punching the space vampire in the mouth?
Yep.
All your grindhouse dreams come to life.
Space steak through your space heart.
There you go.
That does kind of lead me to something we ask everybody that comes on the show. What are you guys currently geeking out over? Not Blade Runner 2.
I am actually I really love games, and currently I've been playing this game called Darkest Dungeon. I don't know if you've heard of it. So I really like I'm loving that game currently. So that's something I'm geeking out over, and I'm pretty much always geeking out over BioWare stuff, Dragon Age lore, and Mass Effect lore. So that's pretty much always I'm geeking out over those things all the time.
What did you think, if I may be so bold, what did you think of Mass Effect Andromeda?
You know, I didn't have time to play that. I've been working on Paradiso, working my butt off. But
Dave's rethinking all his answers very carefully. Like, oh no, I just told Ram that I have to take 3 more days for this page. I better not let him know that I've been playing.
No, but I saw the gameplay. The gameplay looks fun, but I saw the gameplay. Like that's how I do it now. Instead of playing the game, I just watch some of my favorite YouTubers play the game, and I'm like, yeah, that's gotta do now.
Live vicariously.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Andromeda just didn't catch me the way the original trilogy did. You know, yeah, it was fun. The gameplay looks a lot more fun, but Mass Effect really isn't about the gameplay. We all know that. Yeah. And there's actually also an Easter egg in the comic about Mass Effect. I don't like Easter eggs that much, but if you check the first issue, there's sort of a bunker, and there's an N7 written on the bunker, like spray painted sort of. So I was like, yeah, why not?
Nice.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, guys.
Giving away all my Easter eggs.
Of which I have no other. Just one.
Sure.
Ram, what are you geeking out over?
I mean, I play a lot of video games as well, but I'm a big movie buff. I like TV and I like movies. I watch them a lot. So obviously, Blade Runner apart, since we're not discussing that. I've been going down a Nicholas Winding Refn hole, and just watching everything he's done so far. I love Drive. Didn't quite like Neon Demon because I think
that was wild.
I mean, it looked great.
Yeah.
But I think he just went, why do I need a story? I can make a movie look like this. I don't need a story.
That's always.
Yeah, it's. I remember one of my friends highly recommended it. I like his movies a lot too. I mean,
was it the same friend that recommended you stay away from Only God Forgives?
No. I actually. Well, here's the thing. Here's what happens all the time. If you guys ever want a movie to show up on Netflix, just have me buy it first, and then the next day it'll show up on Netflix. Because I saw Drive. I was working at a Blockbuster years and years ago when Blockbusters existed, and I had a buddy. And we would just like you do. We would just talk about movies the entire time. Like that was the best place to work because you just I would just rent an entire actor's filmography.
Yeah.
And my buddy was like, "You gotta watch this movie, Drive. Don't watch any trailers. Just go and watch it." He's like, "Ryan Gosling's in it. Just go watch it," and it blew my mind. So that was like, oh, I'll watch Only God Forgives. And I'd only heard bad things about it. And I watched the trailer, and I'm like a trailer nerd. Like I have like favorite trailers, But there's one trailer specifically for Only God Forgives that makes it look like it's the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, and then you watch it, and like I said, I bought it, of course, and the next day it showed up on Netflix. I was like, Jesus Christ. But there's some really interesting stuff in that movie, and Ryan Gosling gets his ass kicked in that movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, the soundtracks. I have the soundtrack for it. The soundtrack is that still Cliff Martinez? I know he did Drive, but the soundtrack's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure who did the soundtrack for Only God Forgives, but I mean, I think we have very similar thoughts on the movie. I thought visually it was great, and there are bits of it that are really interesting, but. Yeah, it's nothing like the trailer.
No.
It's very different. And you get into it, you're like, what am I watching?
Yeah. I think all of Ryan Gosling's dialogue's in the trailer.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, that's a bold choice. I like people being bold and kind of crazy with their choices. And I think, Nicholas gives Ryan Gosling that outlet to be as totally bold and free and wild as he wants, which I think is probably one of the reasons why they work together. Did you ever watch that documentary about... Wasn't there a documentary about the making of Drive or something filmed by...
No, I didn't watch that.
There's something that... I'm not going to get it right, but there was something that I think Ryan Gosling did.
Well, he did Gosling did Lost River.
No, it wasn't a movie, but it was I think it was a documentary about Nicholas Winding Refn, and I think it was kind of about their partnership or about making one of the movies. I don't know. I could be lying, but I thought I saw it somewhere. But maybe that's worth checking out. I'm sure if you just type in Nicholas Winding Refn documentary, Google, it'll pop up.
Yeah. Or strangely enough, I just watched another sort of, well, not a documentary, but a a instructional video on filmmaking with Ryan Gosling explaining the Kuleshov effect. Don't know if you guys saw that.
No.
But it's right after, I'd gotten a whole bunch of friends together and we watched Drive, and I was as being that annoying guy who pauses the movie just to explain things that are happening that are really cool that nobody else is catching.
Yeah.
Me never to watch a movie with you.
But I was being that guy, and then people asked me to shut up, and I did. But most people say, "Oh my God, Ryan Gosling doesn't have any dialogue in this movie, and he has even less in Only God Forgives." But the idea that a deadpan face with no lines and no dialogue could be juxtaposed with imagery to create a narrative and to tell a story has been there in film for a really long time, and I find it really interesting because I think it translates really well to comics as well. And people like Mignola in his art, and people like Tom King when he's doing his comics, I think they use the Kuleshov effect to great effect when they're writing their stories. So interesting that Drive has brought up a lot of things I've started noticing in comics as well.
That's interesting. Yeah. So
there's also this thing. I don't know if you've seen this. Neil Blomkamp. I think I'm mispronouncing his name. He's been putting this stuff out called Oat Studios. Have you guys heard of that?
Is that his his horror stuff?
Yeah. I saw this really awesome one called Zygote the other day, and it really captured me. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I've seen teases for it. It looks really good.
Oh, the monster looks so good. Maybe I don't know the sources they've taken from, but that monster looked amazing, and that made me have a just my horror senses were all tingling at that, because I love drawing monsters, and I hope, Ram, there's a note to you. Please make monsters in Paradiso so I can draw some. But I love drawing monsters, so I was geeking out on that quite a bit. You should check it out, by the way. Neil Blomkamp's the Oat Studio is putting out some really great stuff. There's also this thing called, I don't remember the name. It's something with a river god, but the effects are so good and the monsters are so believable. It's amazing, actually. Yeah. That's pretty much what
I'll check it out, and I've just put down monsters on the list right after Face Valentine.
I real quick, I found that documentary. It was actually by Nicholas's wife.
It's not like an unbiased source.
Liv Core Fixon wrote and directed a documentary entitled My Life, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, which chronicles the behind-the-scenes experiences of shooting Only God Forgives when the entire family had been relocated to Thailand. So interesting.
Nice. Yeah. I just put that down on my.
I haven't watched it, but I'm sure it's totally weird and wild.
It'll probably be like a modern day Hearts of Darkness.
Yeah, it's just Nicholas Winding Refn trying to get a club soda.
Yeah, just going insane.
Yeah.
I guess they were both filmed in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything you guys want to tease before we let you free?
Well, I think Paradiso is one of those stories, and I love doing longer fiction for this reason. Big fan of slow burn, and if you thought issue 1 was pretty cool, and if you thought the visual imagery in issue 1 was cool, it only gets weirder and crazier and more intense from here. I think Dave will agree now that he's working on issue 4 pages, and there are 2 double-page spreads that I think he's been subconsciously avoiding. He looks because I'm gonna do these later. I'm not doing them now.
You're on to me. Yeah, I'm like, let me just finish everything, and then I'm going to tackle the T-Rex, basically. Because it's 2 double-page spreads. Who does that? He wants to torture me. But yeah, I'm gonna do the best I can on that. But yeah, I think Paradiso is. At the end of the day, I think stories that you make from the heart are what resonate with people. And Paradiso, we have gone through ups and downs making this book, and there have been panels where I really felt an amazing connection with the characters. And I draw the characters as if they were alive, as if they were not just in my head, but they're actually alive somewhere, and I'm just drawing their story. And I hope I did my best to put that in the book, and I hope it translates well to the readers who are reading the book, is that's what an artist can do on a book. Because at the end of the day, the writer is the one who's like thinking of these things, and Ram is like just like, yeah, this is what happens, and he thinks of all these amazing things and sends them to me. So I do the best I can to like make them real, make them feel like it could exist, like it's tangible, but still be kind of fantastical. So like people are both amazed and also are like, oh, okay, this feels pretty real to me. So I think that's what Paradiso is going to be like.
Yeah,
To be fair, I think Dave's also underselling himself, because there have been things that he has brought into the art that didn't exist in the script, and we'll go back and look at it, and I go, whoa, well, this wasn't there in the script. And Dave goes, yeah, but it looks cool. And I go, it totally does, and we should keep it, and we should figure out why it exists in this world. And usually Dave and I will come up with like a really good explanation, really interesting way to weave that into the story. I won't mention because it'll give away spoilers, but it happened with a couple of characters in the first couple of issues.
I think the first time it happened with was the Watcher. Like it was pretty much around like the second page. It's the they probably probably know who the Watcher is. It's the guy with the lasers on his face. I think you probably know that dude. But that was a design that Ram came up with. He was like, yeah, this dude is gonna have like hundreds of lasers on his face, and I just went ahead and I made it because that's one of the characters that I didn't put anything down for. Usually I do character designs to like discuss with Ram how it's gonna look, but that character I was just like, yeah, I know what I'm gonna do with him. So I just drew him on the second page, like right on the page, and it turned out really, I think, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also that character, he's got a thing in the center of his face which didn't exist when we designed him, but now that's become like an interesting. Yeah, it's become an interesting thing, which you will see more details on as you read the issues. So
it is a hell of a way to start the series.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
a very striking visual. Well, again, the first issue of Paradiso is out in comic book stores everywhere on Wednesday, December 6th. And the final order cutoff date, which we know, having read our calendars, is Monday, November 13th.
Ooh.
There you go. Ram, Dev, thanks again for
order
coming.
a copy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for coming on the
Please look
show.
at the art. Please look at the beautiful art and the amazing words.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Shout out to Deerbla and Aditya, who did amazing jobs on the book. Amazing.
The
Deerbla's colors, my art would look not as good, and Aditya's words just.
And check out Image Plus Volume 2, Number 2, if you want a full print interview and preview pages from the first issue as well, because that exists.
Yep. Yes, it exists, and we did a really cool interview with David Brothers at Image. It went out into Image Plus. Preview pages are there. They're also all over the internet because we've been going crazy on social media. So have a look.
Yeah, and I remember you guys had Ashcan previews at New York.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. We gave away a lot of Ashcans at New York. I think Image has also been giving them away with any purchases that were made at the convention. So
I think
hopefully it's out there in the world.
I stuffed the bags myself. Yes. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Sure. It was an awesome
Thank you, Seth.
Always good talking to Ram and Dev.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous book out in comic book stores everywhere. So out on December 6th. What did you guys get anything lately?
Oh dear.
Oh dearie dear.
Oh dear.
There was something that I forgot to mention last week that I...
Too late.
Well, fuck it then.
Yeah.
Episode's over since no one else had anything to talk
Nope.
about. I saw Suburbicon.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs across.
Thumbs across, I guess. Thumbs across America. It had that like
Coen Brothers.
Yeah, it felt like a Coen Brothers movie, which makes sense because they did write it. Mm-hmm. But it did not feel like the Coen Brothers directed it, which also makes sense because George Clooney did. And it just kind of everyone everyone did a great job, but like it just wasn't all there, I guess. Like it was clearly going for that Fargo feel, which you know, then it's still one of their most celebrated movies, and you know, doing very well on, what is it, FX?
Yep.
The series is. Fun fact: my mom is currently watching that, and I kind of like happened to catch some the other day, and the season that she was watching, I think, was season 2, and one of the characters on it looks like a young, chubby Matt Damon, who is the lead character in Suburbicon. That
Yeah, Friday Night Lights, baby.
yeah, well,
Battleship.
for me it was Breaking Bad.
Oh yes,
Breaking
plays
Bad.
Todd. That's right.
Yeah, the shithead Todd.
You know who he's engaged to?
Who?
Not a
Kristen
shithead.
Dunst.
Oh, they played a married couple on Fargo.
That's how they met.
What?
Yeah, man. Sorry to ruin your world.
Damn it.
And here I was thinking that she and Tobey Maguire had something special.
Nah, well, in the early 2000s,
Did they actually have a thing? I was just
according to Sam Raimi.
oh well,
No.
voice of babes.
Yes, Babe's voice. Samuel Raimi. Samuel Ramuel.
Oh, that's
It's
what
Samuel Raimuel.
I am referring to him only as Samuel Ramuel from now on. That is a lie.
His
I'm going to-
Excellency Samuel Raimuel.
You know, we all watched Thor 3.
We did. Ragnarok.
You know, I think it's the best of the Thor trilogy. It's pretty
For sure.
It's pretty fun.
I dug it, man.
It's very colorful.
It's got Korg.
Yeah.
Piss off, Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fucking great. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely I liked it more than Spider-Man. I liked it more than
Spider-Man's still my Marvel winner of the year.
I mean, I like Spider-Man more as a character, but like, you know, I remember that I saw Thor. Actually, I kind of forgot until you said it, to be honest. But like, it's more fun.
It was good, guys. I forgot that we saw it.
I had more fun. The Thor was just, I laughed a lot, and it was just super insane and ridiculous.
It's got Zeppelin twice.
I started reading Walter Simonson's.
Yeah.
Walt.
Good
Walt.
Walt.
I don't know Walt.
But we know Samuel Ramuel.
Yeah, Samuel.
Yeah, we know him well enough to call him by his proper
No,
name.
but Walt Simonson. I am reading his Thor run now.
That cool like synth heavy song in the trailer was not in the movie, correct?
No.
I didn't just have like a stroke while we were watching it.
Nah,
and miss it?
the whatever the name of the band that does the trailer song is Magic Sword.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember being super stoked about it, so much so that I was like, Sam, what's that song? I know if anyone knows it, you know it. And you were like, yeah, it came out last year. And I was like, oh, here I was thinking it was a 70s song.
Now the
or an 80s song.
I think Mark Mothersbaugh's score takes a lot of hints from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely has a lot of bwang. It sounds almost like a soundtrack that was like, hey, that Tron Legacy soundtrack was pretty cool. Let's add some real instruments into it, not just a computer, you know, but do that.
Yeah. It's a little more fully formed.
Yeah, which I dug.
And more, at the same time, more kind of like 80s-esque.
Yes. Which went with the color palette of the movie.
Very Flash Gordon color palette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I think I might rewatch Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Because that DVD, even the DVD, like I don't have it on Blu-ray or anything, but that DVD looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it does.
Transfer. The see, for me, the thing that holds Thor behind Spider-Man, I didn't like the opening to Thor Ragnarok outside of the fight on against Searcher in his fiery realm.
Yeah, the beginning was very Lethal Weapon 2.
But like all the stuff on Earth is rushed. All the stuff back on
Asgard
is rushed.
that stuff's rushed. But Tessa Thompson's not in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Tessa Thompson was amazing.
Yeah, she rules. I thought the Hulk was really fun. You know, they let Chris. I think when they did that, Marvel did that like Thor has a roommate thing. They're like, and it like hit well. Like people loved it. They're like, oh, this is where we're going. Because
according to Taika, like 80% of the dialogue is improvised.
There's the in the trailer Thor has the moment where, you know, the Hulk's like, it's not in the movie, which kind of bummed me out, but Hulk's like, you know, the biggest muscle's the brain. And he's like, no, this is a muscle. This is a muscle. This is a muscle. Full of muscles, brains everywhere. I'm the strongest one. And like that is in the roommate skit they did. And if you watch that roommate skit, the two they did, it's like you can totally get that's where the vibe. Like, oh, let's let Chris Hemsworth be funny.
Yeah.
So
and I heard that Kevin Smith was a big indirect influence on a lot of or some of the character changes
on one of the podcasts. Yeah, I'm not sure which podcast it was, but
well, according to Mark Bernardin, he was like, "It was me."
Yeah, because he was like, Kevin Smith isn't as critical as others are. Also, one of my favorite little nods. It was so tiny, but
it's wild. We've had Mark Bernardin on the show.
Yeah, seriously, that's freaking amazing. But like one of my favorite Thor character, period, is Beta Ray Bill, and it bums me out because he was like originally they were like he was going to be in this, but then they were like, oh, he was going to have a really tiny part. And people probably would have been more upset with the tiny part than they were with him not being in it, and vice versa, because he's a big part of Thor. His face is in the movie. They have like the Tower of Champions and the Contest of Champions. Yeah. Beta Ray Bill's face is on there, the space horse looking man.
You know who drew Contest of Champions?
Who?
John Romita Jr.
Oh shit, John Romita Jr. One of my favorite artists on the planet.
Yep.
I will say, watching this movie kind of made me want to have a like Hulk
best friend like Beta Ray Bill.
Yeah.
Of course.
Me too.
A Planet Hulk movie, because
this is probably as close as we'll get.
Yeah, because I know that like the Coliseum stuff, the champions, like that was influenced.
Gladiator Hulk.
Yeah, that was influenced heavily by Planet Hulk, and I know like there are some other elements. Like I've never read it. Yeah, I've never read it, but I know some of the plot points and stuff like that. And I always thought that was a very interesting Hulk story in general. So I was like, oh,
written by my man Greg Pak.
Oh, your man.
Yeah. But no, Korg and Meek are both introduced in Planet Hulk. So those are big influences as well. Unfortunately, Universal has partial distribution rights to any solo Hulk films, which is Disney's like, well, we don't want to share. We want to own everything.
I guess that is another reason why we haven't had a solo Hulk film since Ruffalo.
That's the biggest reason.
The biggest? Okay. Yeah. Because I guess they could probably see, Mark Ruffalo is being very well received. He probably could helm a movie at this point.
And The Incredible Hulk was, it didn't make nearly as much waves as Iron Man, which had come out the month before, but it still performed decently well.
Yeah, and the biggest detriment to that one, of course, famously Edward Norton, non-media.
Yeah, I mean, he just didn't according to rumors, didn't play nice with the filmmakers.
Yeah, well, and a big thing is I remember hearing is that he wanted writing credit because he quote unquote did so much last minute rewrites on it.
Yeah,
that he felt that he was entitled to writing credit, and so because of that, because they wouldn't give it to him, he was like, well, fuck you then.
Yeah, and
apparently Jim Carrey on Kick-Ass 2.
Downey Jr., Jon Favreau, and Shane Black helped kind of like jointly rewrite a lot of the first Iron Man film too.
I remember hearing that much like Thor Ragnarok, most of that dialogue is improvised because they only had like half scripts going into the movie.
Jeff Bridges would say it was the biggest budget indie flick he had ever done. Yeah. That kind of like spirit of creativity there. Yeah. But no, I mean, Ragnarok's a good time if you're expecting something a little more regal like the first two films, or it is not that.
Yeah, no, the trailers do a good job of preparing you for the tone of the film.
Mm-hmm. What would you say your guys' favorite part if you had to narrow it down to something?
I mean, the hardest I've laughed in the movie theaters this year, spoilers from here on out, is when Bruce Banner, there's this thing, Hulk turns back into Bruce Banner after 2 years, and he's afraid if he turns into the Hulk again, he'll be the Hulk forever. And so they're having this fight back on Asgard, and Tessa Thompson, Valkyrie's character, had like been buddies with Hulk for the 2 years, but she's like, I feel like I know you. To Bruce Banner, Bruce is like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah, they have no idea who
and
each
there's
other
this
are
moment
outside
where
of
like
Hulk.
there's a giant wolf and like shit's hitting the fan,
Fenris, yeah.
and Bruce Banner's like, now you're gonna know why you know me, and like he turns into the Hulk. Oh, you think he's gonna turn into the Hulk, but he just falls and hits the Rainbow Road, and just and like everyone on the screen stops for a second, and they just go right back to what they're doing, and he's just fucking knocked out. And I thought that was freaking hilarious. It wasn't my favorite part, but I thought that was hilarious. I mean, I enjoyed I enjoyed Tessa Thompson's arc because she's this drunk like ex-warrior who doesn't want to face kind of her past and even reality kind of. And is brought back into it, and like even Thor looks up to her, because of what she was before she goes to Sakaar. So that moment where she's like in the suit and the fireworks are going off, she's just fucking rocking people left and right. One of the, I think a movie, everyone's talking about how funny this movie is. The movie's very funny, but I think one of the sweetest, one of the most bittersweet moments in any of the Marvel movies in recent memory happens in Thor Ragnarok. And it pays off because even in Thor 1 and 2, which, I think Thor 1's pretty solid. I mean, Thor 2 has some okay moments too. But I think a big payoff of that is the elevator scene between Thor and Loki. And they're talking about how Loki's like, you never cared about me. Like, you just wanted, and he's like, no, dude, like, I looked up to you. Like, you were my hero. And that's a part that I think has kind of gone unnoticed in how funny the movie is and how, like, Flash Gordon-y the movie is, which is great. That's all great. But that elevator scene between Thor and Loki is the culmination of those first two movies, where you finally get the moment between these two brothers that I thought was really, really well done, and one of my favorite moments. But again, like the visuals. I mean, the visuals of this, like you're saying, the beginning where Immigrant Song kicks in for the first time. I think it's better when it kicks in the second time.
Yeah.
I like that Thor loses an eye. Kind of repping the
misleading clip in the trailer.
Yeah.
And sizzle reel footage for Infinity War.
So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was overall a really good time. But I agree with Sam. Like the first act, if you're feeling a little like, what is this? Like, it's kind of a like chore. It doesn't last long.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's
once they see Odin, it solidifies.
Yeah. And then and it's great. Kate Blanchett is fantastic. Like she's chewing the scenery like awesome. But like, as much as I loved her stuff, every time they cut to her away from Sakaar, I was like, get back to Sakaar, because like Sakaar was the most fun I've had in a Marvel movie in like for real like a long time.
Yeah. Korg.
I mean, Korg's fantastic. His little bug friend.
Meek.
Yeah. It's Korg.
I gotta agree. Like the entire time on the trash planet was just not trash. It was wonderful. I loved like everything involving the gladiator battle, all the way from Korg to the end of the fight where where he flips the switch and just and makes Thor lose. Like that was just a fun ride. And then just the Hulk and Thor interacting.
Yeah. Baby arms.
Yeah. And Thor constantly trying to do Black Widow's little
sun's going down.
The sun's going down, and it not working. I was like, yes, thank you. especially when they're in the fight and Thor thinks that he's starting to see some of Banner coming through Thor, and he's like, yeah, sun's going down, blah blah blah, blah. And like he touches his hand, and then Thor just goes, ah, bah!
Yeah.
And then Loki jumps up and he's like, yeah, that fucking hurts.
Now you know how it feels.
Yeah, that's the line.
Now you know how it feels.
The hell was that?
Me.
Did you guys hear that? The fuck was that? Some fucking creature down in the basement.
Piss off, Ghost.
Yeah, piss off, Ghost.
Apparently he based that voice off Polynesian like bouncers.
Oh, really?
Like you would get these really buff like Polynesian bouncers, but they would have like they'd be really soft spoken.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, okay.
Yeah, no, he as soon as he shows up, fuck yeah.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Korg.
Yeah, hey, cool. What, Doug? Is Doug the one?
Doug is the one that gets killed by Hulk, I guess.
Another day, another Doug.
Yeah. And then Meek is his little bug. Meek's dead.
Yeah. But like,
hey, Meek's alive, guys.
one of my favorite parts is when he's like, hey, "This is Meek. He's got souls hands," and like he's like in the background doing like karate throughout the entire scene. Like, shing, shing, shing. I was waiting.
So what's this goo that you keep spitting out?
Oh man. No, I liked Carl Urban again. It's another nerddom. Checks off. I mean,
it was halfway through the movie that I was like, fucking know who this guy is. Is that fucking Dredd?
Yeah.
Is it fucking is Jake shitting himself right now with excitement?
For me, it was more so that like, oh, Carl Urban hasn't already been in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, when we saw him on AwesomeCon, they have the pictures out. His table's long as shit because of all the pictures from the Bourne series,
Lord of the Rings.
He was in the fucking Star Trek. Now this
Hercules.
And like the one thing I knew, again, I don't know much about. Really, I don't read that much Thor, to be honest. I'm doing the Walt Simonson stuff, but I know the famous. What's his character's name again?
Scourge.
Scourge takes a stand is one of the most famous Thor moments of all time.
M16s,
which they definitely kind of have in here.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew that coming from the trailer, but it was still. I was waiting to see if they did that moment well, and I thought they did.
I did too.
Yeah, I was looking forward.
Yeah,
I
was really happy with his redemption.
Yeah, no, that's always on top.
I don't like
list.
how quickly the Warriors 3 got fucking
done.
All those
was it even all three of them?
Yes, yeah. They're not all killed at once. Mm-hmm. Hogan leads the Asgardian army and gets fucking he's the last man.
He gets killed pretty hardcore for a Marvel movie.
Yeah,
the impaled and leaning right. Is it leaning back on it? Yeah, pretty intense.
Yeah, whereas Volstagg and Fondrel just get knives.
Where was Sif?
Sif. So originally Jamie Alexander was supposed to be in it, but she was busy filming Blind Spot. They didn't let her know until deep in Blind Spot's production schedule, and so I think they kind of, in a passing line, are just she's already out doing shit. So that means
it saved her.
Yeah,
it saved her life.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, because Sif.
Yeah, because she probably would have just been killed off like everyone else.
Yeah, Kevin Feige was just we thought it was a noble way for them to go out, and it shows the stakes of the story. And it's no, they don't. They Volstagg opens the Bifrost Bridge and gets a fucking knife in his body.
Yeah, he's like, hey, oh shit. I loved Rogue Idris Elba.
Oh, yeah,
was so fucking awesome.
I think it was the filmmakers realized they had Idris Elba as Heimdall.
Yeah,
they're like, oh,
they're like, hey, who's this guy that's been playing Heimdall the last two movies, and why is his schedule so hectic to work? Idris fucking Elba.
Yeah.
Where did he come from?
You're done with the Dark Tower? Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I am.
Oh, you got some free time?
I am totally gonna rent that movie. I gotta know. I gotta watch it.
Dude,
I'm curious.
I'm even more butt fucking insane.
Did you buy it on Vudu?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yet.
But I see it every time I log in because it's right there, new movies.
Yeah,
it's already out.
Yes,
you can rent
digital,
it already.
Yeah. So I'm always I could.
But I gotta get
and
the
it's
founder
right next to the
first.
founder. Yeah. You got it. You're sitting there going, Dark Tower, founder.
Well, gents, this is the story of is this the last time we chat? No, we have one more episode right before Justice League
and Punisher. Yeah.
I think this is the last one to be released before Justice League comes out, but we will record one more time before it comes out.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll have that week delay of what we think of.
It's a strong delay,
Justice League.
Yeah.
So this is the last one you'll hear at home, provided you're hearing them in order.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe Justice League came out 2 years ago.
Or maybe you're all.
Why are you listening?
You all are going dude. It's opening weekend for Matthew Vaughn's Man of Steel 2, and it's the highest rated gross superhero movie of all time.
Yeah.
Why are you guys talking about old news? Sorry. I haven't, I'm glad that Matthew Vaughn is directing Man of Steel 2. Future people.
Yeah. And Kingsman 3 at the same time.
Yeah.
And Statesman.
Oh, yeah. He wants to turn that into a spin-off, too, doesn't he?
Good.
I'm okay with that.
Good.
Yeah, bring it all on. Let them all come. But you guys get into anything else?
No.
No.
What about you, Sam?
Shit.
What about you, Samuel Raimuel?
Yes, Sam. Spotlight.
Yeah. Starring Michael Keaton.
And Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo. who are
Hulk.
both in the Marvel universe, and Rachel McAdams also in the Marvel universe.
Huh.
What the fuck?
Anybody else in that cast that's like noteworthy? No, not really.
I still haven't seen it.
It's pretty
You still
good.
haven't? I think it's on. Is it on Netflix?
Yeah, I think so.
You should watch it.
It's
I mean, it's
damn
Best
good.
Picture. It's real good.
Yeah, well, there's a lot.
Sorry,
of
I'm boycotting it for trying to come out the same weekend as Star Wars Episode 7.
Oh.
Take that, Josh.
I know who you're referencing.
No, I just I just haven't gotten around to seeing it.
Yeah, it's a good time. Well,
Well,
in as much as the subject matter can allow.
it's a well-made and important movie. I know what you mean, Sam.
Yeah.
I got your back.
Got Me,
You got mail?
starring Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan.
Yeah. I enjoyed that
That
film.
was a good film.
It was nice.
You know, I own Sleepless in Seattle.
Oh,
Good. Damn right.
And I'll do it again.
It's a winner.
We should watch that at Emerald City this year.
Okay.
And
Even
There
though
you
the movie ends in New York.
no,
What if we
it's
started
not
the
called
movie-
Sleepless in New York? It's
What-
called
Oh.
Sleepless in Seattle.
What if we started the movie in Seattle and ended it in New York?
On a tablet on top of the Empire State Building?
Sure.
Yeah.
I've never been to
Neat.
the top of the Empire State
Yeah,
Building.
it's
Me
pretty
neither.
nice.
Isn't it like $50?
It's about that. It might be a little bit less.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I
I know when I worked there, I got a 50% discount. It was like $20-ish. So
that sounds about right then.
it's $20 and some change. So
I don't actually. Maybe I have. I don't know.
Never been there. Never been top of the rock.
It's a
I've
terrible
never
memory.
been to the top of the rock.
Yeah. I've certainly been in the Empire State Building. I've just never been to the top of it.
I've been both. I've even they have 2 observation decks as well. They have one on. I'm not going to remember what floors they are, but there's like the one that like you see at like the end of all the romantic comedies, and then there's like above that there's like the antenna towers, and there's like a little bubble that you can go into for like an extra $20 a person. You can go into that little bubble, and it's about the size of the room that we're in right now, plus an elevator shaft. So I was very uncomfortable. And I was like, okay, cool. It's the same view, but a little bit higher.
A little bit softer now. Yeah. Well, thanks again to Ram and Dev for coming on the show. Again, you can order Paradiso today, and it's out in comic book stores everywhere on Wednesday, December 6th. This has been another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
Fried chicken.
Thank you very much. The Legend of Samuel Raimuel.
Goes to Tom Joad. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.